Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. We are jumping right into some incredibly cool concepts from grade 7 life science. Today, we're unpacking exactly how plants survive, thrive, and reproduce. We're going to be using the St. Paul Pacing Guide as our map, specifically focusing on Unit 2, Lesson 2, Plants, and the source-based model. So, if you're ready to really get a handle on the mechanics of plant diversity and reproduction, you are in the exact right place. Let's get into it.
Okay, here's a quick look at our roadmap. 1. Seedless versus seed plants. 2. Spores, cones, and seeds. 3. Plant reproduction models. 4. Sorting ferns and conifers. And 5. The COR insect challenge.
Section 1. Seedless versus seed plants. The survival strategy.
Right off the bat, I want you to think about a fundamental puzzle. If plants literally cannot walk, how on earth do they manage to spread across the entire globe? I mean, think about it. Animals migrate. Birds fly. But a plant? It's rooted in the ground. Yet we see them absolutely everywhere, from the densest forests to the most remote islands. So how are they conquering new territory? Well, that mystery gets right to the heart of plant survival, and the secret lies entirely in how they reproduce. To solve that problem, plants basically took two massive evolutionary pathways. On one side, you have seedless plants. A classic example is the fern, which you've probably seen on a hike or a nature walk. Instead of seeds, they rely on these tiny structures called spores to spread. Now, on the other side, we have seed plants. This group includes flowering plants and conifers, like pine trees, which obviously use seeds. So we've got two completely different biological strategies, but they're both aiming for the exact same goal, creating that next generation.
Section 2. Spores, cones, and seeds. Plant reproduction tools.
Let's start with spores. These are single-celled reproductive units used by seedless plants. And because they are literally just a single cell, they are unbelievably tiny and lightweight. Unlike a seed, they don't come with a built-in food supply. Instead, the plant strategy is basically a numbers game. They produce a massive amount of spores, let the wind carry them away, and just hope they land in a perfectly moist environment where they can actually grow. Next up, we have seeds, which represent a huge, game-changing evolutionary leap. A seed is actually a tiny little plant embryo. It comes prepackaged with a tough protective coat to survive harsh conditions, and its very own built-in food supply. That stored energy gives the baby plant the boost it needs to start growing before it can even perform photosynthesis. That incredible little package is exactly why seed plants have been so wildly successful all over the planet.
So where do these seeds actually come from? Well, for a specific group of plants called conifers, they come from cones, like pine cones. Conifers are seed plants, but they don't bother with flowers. Instead, their genetic material is housed and protected inside the rigid, woody layers of a cone until those seeds are finally ready to be released into the world.
But what about the plants that do use flowers? Well, if you've ever done a flower dissection in class, you know that flowers aren't just there to look pretty. They are highly specialized reproductive machines. Different anatomical parts inside the flower have very specific jobs. Some produce pollen, some catch the pollen, and some eventually swell up to create fruits that protect the developing seeds inside.
Section 3. Plant reproduction models. Ferns, pines, and squirrels.
Let's actually visualize how this works in the real world, starting with the fern. Step 1. The fern releases its super lightweight spores into the air, usually from the underside of its leaves. Step 2. Because they're essentially weightless single cells, these spores get swept up and travel on wind currents, sometimes for miles. Step 3. If a spore gets incredibly lucky and lands in a damp, suitable spot, it germinates and grows. It's totally reliant on the wind and a whole lot of luck. Now contrast that with the biological strategy of a conifer, like a pine tree. Step 1. The pine tree produces cones packed with nutrient-dense seeds. Step 2. Animals enter the chat. A squirrel comes along, finds the cone, eats a few seeds, and buries the rest to stash away for winter. Step 3. The squirrel inevitably forgets where it hid some of that stash. Those forgotten, buried seeds are now sitting in a perfectly protected underground environment, ready to sprout into new pine trees. The plant is literally using animal behavior to plant its own seeds. It's a brilliant ecological partnership.
Section 4. Sorting ferns and conifers. Practice time.
Let's test this out and organize these traits. First up, uses spores. We know from our wind model that this is the fern, right? So fern gets the check. Next, has cones. We just saw that cones are the woody fortresses for conifers like pine trees, so conifer gets that check. And finally, uses seeds.
Again, the conifer is our seed plant here. Sorting biological traits like this is a super helpful way to make sure you've really got these distinctions locked in. But wait, hold on a second. Doesn't every single plant grow from a seed? You hear this misconception all the time. Because we plant seeds in our gardens and eat seeds in our fruit, it's so easy to just assume that all plant life kicks off that way. So let's officially clear that up. Time for a quick knowledge check. I'm throwing this directly to you. Based on what we just went over, which type of plant reproduces without seeds, and what specific structure does it use instead? Take 1 second to lock in your answer. All right, here's the answer. The crucial point to remember is that seedless plants absolutely do not use seeds. Instead, they reproduce using those tiny single-celled units called spores. And the classic example we've been talking about is the fern. If you nailed that, you've successfully grasped one of the biggest divides in all of plant biology.
Section 5. The CER Insect Challenge. Claim, Evidence, Reasoning. Now, let's build a rock-solid scientific argument using the Claim, Evidence, and Reasoning Framework, or CER. First, our claim. Insects are vital for flowering plant reproduction. Next, the observable evidence. Insects land on flowers to drink nectar, and while they're doing that, they transfer pollen between those specialized flower structures we discussed earlier. Finally, the reasoning that ties the whole thing together. We know that pollen has to be transferred for a flower to reproduce. Therefore, without insects driving that pollination, the plant can't form seeds, which means it can't reproduce at all. It's a perfect example of how deeply intertwined animal behavior and plant life cycles really are. As we wrap up today's explainer on plant reproduction, I want to leave you with a pretty big question to chew on. How might rapid environmental changes disrupt these incredibly delicate plant and animal cycles? I mean, if global wind patterns shift, what happens to those fern spores? If insect populations crash, what happens to all of our flowering plants? Biology isn't just a list of facts, it is a massively interconnected web. I really hope this helped you visualize these life science concepts today. Thanks so much for hanging out and learning with me, and keep asking great questions.